It's now been 2 years since 4 men and 4 women entered the giant terrarium to see if they could sustain their lives as well as the environment. But 2 years later, some hard questions remain. Is it science, a stunt, or a scam? Biospherian Gail Alling is fond of sailing. 2 years ago, before she and her 7 colleagues closed the airtight door to this huge test tube, she compared the expedition to sailing the ocean on a small ship.
There, you're out there and you've got to rely on your own intelligence and the know-how of the ship. And likewise for here, the idea is that this is a completely sealed system. There is no exchange of material in and out.
But the supposedly self-sustaining good ship Biosphere steamed into port for supplies about twice a month during the last year. Air and pure oxygen were pumped in to stabilize the bioatmosphere. The airlock door was reportedly unsealed no less than 28 times to send supplies in and take samples out. No surprise to people like Rocky Stewart.
Yeah, I don't know that I would call this project science at all.
Stewart worked on the computer software which controls the Biosphere. On the day the door was closed, he resigned. He knew Biosphere management had secretly installed a scrubber to cleanse the air of excess carbon dioxide. What was going through your head at that point?
Basically felt like they were misrepresenting the project, and I didn't want to have any part of it.
The $150 million closed ecosystem, complete with 3,800 species, an ocean, rainforest, desert, and agricultural land, was sold as a scientific, business, and educational endeavor. A primary goal, to better understand interactions in the environment of Biosphere 1, the Earth. Biospherians viewed this as a step toward human colonization of the Moon or Mars.
No one would ever put a biosphere like this on the Moon or Mars.
But NASA's Gerald Soffen believes a lot can be learned from Biosphere 2. He says the press and the public misunderstood what the project is and is not.
It's more like Epcot Center than it is a scientific experiment. And that's perhaps caused a lot of the confusion.
While well short of Disney proportions, the privately owned for-profit Biosphere 2 remains a magnet for tourists. 500,000 have visited the facility and filled cash registers at the gift shop. Some critics, like fired Biosphere lab technician Ron Pepe, say luring tourists is the primary goal here.
But if you're going to do that, why don't you just tell the world from the beginning, we're going to have tourism first, maybe science later, once we get real scientists in the biosphere.
The credibility crisis at Biosphere has scared away many top scientists. But those who are working with the project say judgment has come too quickly. After all, they say, Biosphere 2 is supposed to be a 100-year project.
I mean, some things probably worked and some things probably didn't. And their publicity office probably handles a few things wrong. But the general concept is 100 years or longer. So at the end of 100 years, they can look back and see whether they screwed up.
The first 2 years of Biosphere have proven 8 people can live and work in a bottle, growing their own food and naturally recycling everything, albeit with some significant weight loss and a little help from outside.
But that's not really science, that's more of a stunt. So I think some good people put in there and with some encouragement over a longer period of time could do some very interesting things in there.
Unser USA-Korrespondent Peter Kleim hat das Experiment während seiner gesamten Dauer für uns beobachtet. Er ist jetzt vor Ort in der Nähe von Tucson im Bundesstaat Arizona. Peter, hat Biosphäre 2 die Wissenschaft nun in irgendeiner Weise weitergebracht?
Nein, also einen Nobelpreis wird hier so schnell niemand verliehen bekommen. Die akademische Welt steht diesem Glashaus hier in der Wüste auch ziemlich skeptisch gegenüber. Das Ganze hier gleicht eher einer großen Überlebenskunst. Weder ein Tier noch eine Pflanze noch die Menschen dort drin sind verhungert. Man hat beispielsweise immer wieder in der ganzen Zeit über die 2 Jahre das gleiche Wasser benutzt, das auf natürliche Art und Weise wieder aufbereitet wurde. Nein, aber wirklich Neues ist hierbei nicht herausgekommen.
Peter, was passiert jetzt mit der Anlage? Wird es ein neues Experiment geben oder wird das Ganze in der Tat ein Vergnügungspark?
Nun, das ganze Projekt hier ist auf immerhin 100 Jahre angelegt. Das Ganze klingt ein bisschen größenwahnsinnig, aber im Hintergrund steht ja auch nicht die Max-Planck-Gesellschaft oder die Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, sondern ein etwas schrulliger Milliardär aus Texas. Eine neue Crew, die trainiert derzeit und sie soll demnächst, und zwar genau in 5 Monaten, aus dieser Erdatmosphäre hier verschwinden und in die dortige eintauchen.
Soweit unser Korrespondent Peter Kleim aus den USA.
2 Jahre in einem luftdicht verriegelten Glashaus der Biosphäre 2 auf, um wissenschaftliche Versuche durchzuführen.
Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre nannten die Veranstalter die Inszenierung von heute. 2 Jahre lang war das lebende Inventar von Biosphäre 2 in der hermetisch abgeschlossenen Kunstwelt eingesperrt. Nun genossen sie zum ersten Mal wieder die Wüstenluft von Arizona.
It's a different atmosphere.
Glauben Sie mir, die Atmosphäre ist ganz anders hier draußen. 2 Jahre lang waren sie für die Welt, in der sie lebten, ganz alleine verantwortlich. Ein abgeschlossenes System, in dem Mensch und Tier nur das essen, trinken und atmen konnten, was die künstliche Umwelt ihnen bot. Es ging nicht ohne Pannen. Ihre Welt verbrauchte zu viel Sauerstoff. Um sie vor dem Ersticken zu retten, musste Gas nachgeschossen werden. Ihr kleiner Ozean wäre beinahe umgekippt. Sie haben ihn gerade noch einmal gerettet. Es wäre ein katastrophaler Verlust gewesen für die Nahrungskette, von der sie lebten. Nebenbei und mit voller Absicht wurde das schöne private Experiment zur Touristenattraktion mit Millionenumsatz gemacht. Hier herrscht ein Rummel, der viele etablierte Wissenschaftler bis heute am Ernst der Sache zweifeln lässt.
Die Biosphäre blicken jetzt nach vorne. Ein paar Monate lang wird ihr Glashaus überholt, dann ist es fertig für die nächste Mannschaft. Und so kann es immer weitergehen, 100 Jahre lang. Wer weiß, wenn es bis dahin mit der Verschmutzung der Biosphäre 1, der Resterde, so weitergeht wie bisher, dann ist vielleicht dieses Riesenterrarium hier der letzte bewohnbare Fleck auf dem blauen Planeten.
The longest shuttle flight ever to conduct medical experiments. By the way, CNN will have live coverage of the liftoff scheduled for 10:53 a.m. Eastern Time, and right now, a 90% chance of good weather for that launch.
Space Shuttle Columbia primed, but with no place to go right away. The shuttle was fueled and prepared on the launch pad in Florida. 7 astronauts and some 48 laboratory rats all on board. However, thunderstorms in southwestern Florida have caused a delay. NASA has about 2 more hours before it would be forced to scrap any launch plans for this day. Once Columbia does go, the astronauts are planning medical experiments to test the effects of spaceflight on man over the 2-week flight. That'll be the longest flight in shuttle history.
CNN's John Holloman joins us now with the latest on the Space Shuttle Columbia. Hi, John.
Hi, Bobby. NASA managers have decided to wait a few more minutes before deciding whether or not to cancel today's shuttle launch. The crew has been on its back in the top of the orbiter for more than 3 hours now, and if the launch doesn't happen soon, they'll be told to come back from the launch pad. If you look out there, you can see the crew cabin. Columbia's on the top of Columbia, and the crew members, as I say, have been there, and they're getting sort of tired of this. The problem is bad weather, and you can probably see from that picture, the clouds are there. The sky behind the shuttle is white rather than blue. Heavy clouds within 10 miles of the Kennedy Space Center and the approach of thunderstorms to the area, both problems. The forecast was for rain to begin at the launch pad sometime in the next few minutes. NASA won't launch if there is rain or a storm cloud within 10 miles of the pad. Managers, though, say the shuttle itself is in excellent condition. The 48 laboratory rats, which were loaded yesterday, will remain on board overnight, and the plan for Thursday is the same as today. Hope the weather Friday morning is better than it was on Thursday, and that the crew will be able to begin its 14-day mission to study how extended periods of weightlessness affect the human body. One more thing I'd like to show you. The CNN Weather Office has just come up with a new weather map showing you what's going on in the Florida area, and we can probably show you that now. You can see the Kennedy Space Center there on the right of your screen, and there are clouds, including some that are yellow, meaning fairly heavy storms, just to the south of the launch pad. The NASA managers say if those clouds don't go away or that rain doesn't stop, it's going to be tough. Most of the crew members are scientists who say some unusual things happen to humans when they are weightless, including the fact that red blood cells get smaller, the muscle tone that you have when you've worked out on Earth goes away, and they're going to study this during the 14-day mission to see how it changes and to see how it affects people down here on Earth below. Reed?
Others refusing to cooperate. Storm clouds have surrounded the launch pad at the Florida Kennedy Space Center. All 3 of the shuttle's emergency landing sites overseas also are having weather woes. NASA has yet another hour in the window before it will launch or postpone today's liftoff.
Today, because of bad weather in Florida, has just been resumed. As you can see, the weather in Florida is better. There's blue sky behind. The countdown clock begins to tick now, and the last 6.5 minutes before the launch. CNN will provide you with live coverage of the launch when it occurs, about 6.5 minutes from right now. It's John Holloman reporting live. Back to my colleague Jim Huber.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
The live event is the launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. If we take a look down there, you can see that the dome over the liquid fuel tank of Columbia is being moved away. Launch is scheduled for about 2 minutes from right now. And you can only imagine the thoughts that must be going through the minds of the 2 women and 5 men who are the crew for this mission. They are going through some last-minute...
Columbia have now closed and locked their visors for flight. T-minus 1 minute, 45 seconds, and counting.
This is NASA commentator Mitch Varnes in Florida, who is going to do the final countdown for us as Columbia prepares to lift off the pad with its 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen on board.
1 minute and 30 seconds away from liftoff.
The launch was delayed for 2 hours because of bad weather that rolled into Florida and one of the emergency launch sites for the shuttle in Spain. But the weather in Spain cleared up, and just in the past couple of minutes...
1 minute, 15 seconds.
The weather in Florida has improved. During the last minute of launch, right before launch, we'll let you listen to Mitch Varnes, who is watching this from the launch room at the Kennedy Space Center.
T-minus 1 minute.
1 minute, 31 seconds due to RSS cargo hold. NTD SRO on 212. Go ahead. Sir, FCO has thrown the whole fire switch due to a CMEV-2 failure. It is mandatory for launch.
There's a problem, and we don't know what it is yet, but...
Okay, I copy that. And what do you think the chances are of getting that back operational? We understand the chances are good at this point. Stand by. Okay, we've got 4 minutes and 51 seconds of hold time, SRO.
Countdown clock now holding at T-minus 31 seconds. We have 4.5 minutes to resume the countdown.
From what we could hear, there was a problem in the payload bay. One of the...
approval, the resumption to concur, or to start the countdown again, would come from our test director, Al Sofchi.
For a range failure.
What they've just announced, Bobby, is a range failure, which could be one of the emergency devices which would cause the shuttle, to blow up if something, if it weren't correct. I'm sure this is something that the NASA managers are checking out very carefully, and as soon as they tell us what's going on, we'll be able to share it with you.
Minutes to restart the launch. What do they mean by that, and why do they only have 4 minutes?
To tell you the truth, I am not quite certain of that. There are some things in the payload bay that are time sensitive. They've had to vent gases from the payload bay, and at one point, one of the payload managers said they'd only be able to keep that the payload bay in the condition it's in right now because of the laboratory rats and the other science experiments for a certain amount of time before they reach orbit, and that's what I imagine this.
The unexpected hold on the countdown appears to be caused by the failure of a main computer in the range safety office over on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Troubleshooting of this unit is now in work.
Well, you heard that. It's a computer not aboard the shuttle at all, but at the Canaveral Air Force Station. The range safety computer would issue destruct commands. There are explosive charges, which you can see there on the side of the main fuel tank and on the solid rocket boosters as well. If something went wrong, those things could be exploded to keep them from falling down over populated areas on the ground. That computer at the Air Force Base certainly has to work as well as the other computers.
This SRO, go ahead. Yeah, we've got 4 minutes and 51 seconds of hold time before we have to cut off, and we're in it, already in it 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Yes, sir, I understand. We expect a final decision on this situation momentarily. Thank you.
This is a new one for me, Bobby. As you know, the NASA managers point out and the astronauts point out how complicated the space shuttle is. It's much more complicated than an airplane, and there are many more people involved.
All this equipment seems so ultra-sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, bad weather, moisture, anything could cause problems for these external pieces of equipment. The tiles on the shuttle themselves, they won't make it safe to launch when there's rain in the area, because rain could potentially loosen those black tiles that you see on the bottom of the orbiter. There was some concern that there might be rain there between noon and 1 o'clock today. Turned out that that didn't happen. And you can see it's in the 70s in Florida, and there are waves of heat that are visible there as we look at the shuttle from this angle, as the NASA managers continue to decide whether they can get this computer at the Canaveral Air Force Station to work, and or somehow override that and allow the shuttle to launch without that computer working.
And they'll have to make that decision now within the next minute or so, if we're still in that 4-minute window.
We have an oxygen anomaly in the E-teener tank. We're presently reading about 15,000 ppm. That's HAZ 07. NCDT prop, the purge has been off. That's probably expected because of the hold. We turned the intertank purge off at T-minus 1 minute, 15 seconds. Understand. NTD SRO and 212. Go ahead, SRO. Sir, we are no-go for the day.
Well, that's bad news, Bobby. The computer at the Canaveral Air Force Station apparently is not going to be able to be brought back.
Oh, their window today was only until 1 o'clock or so, wasn't it? Or
yeah, 1:23 is the final moment that they could launch the shuttle and get it into the proper orbit today. So it appears that they'll try again tomorrow, beginning at about 10:53 Eastern Time. Bobby and Reed, that's it from here for now. It's too bad. They really thought they were going to be able to get it up about 2 minutes ago, and it just wasn't able to make orbit.
Well, better safe than sorry. We'll be back with you tomorrow, John. Thanks. And that's
just a few minutes ago, the countdown clock was started, then stopped, while technicians worked on a main computer failure. You're looking at a live picture of the shuttle there. The problem was not able to be fixed, and it forced liftoff to be postponed until Friday. The original liftoff time was set for 14:53 GMT, but thunderclouds near the Space Center forced officials to postpone it. Bad weather also plagued the shuttle's emergency landing sites. We will have live coverage of the launch when it does happen.
Rainy weather is in the forecast across the southeastern United States, although the rains do ease overall but the Texas coast. A few thunderstorms in the plains, and there'll be rain and mountain snow across British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the northwestern U.S., with some rain showers even possible across southern sections of California. We hope you have a good day, whatever your weather, wherever you are. I'm meteorologist Valerie Voss.
NASA scrubbed the mission with 31 seconds left on the countdown because of a computer problem. Liftoff had been scheduled for 14:53 GMT, but it was delayed for 2 hours when storm clouds developed over the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Liftoff is now postponed at least until Friday. CNN's John Holloman has a preview, though, of the shuttle's mission when it does go up.
During 14 days in space, the crew of 2 women and 5 men will conduct a series of medical experiments.
This mission is about human beings and trying to improve their quality of life here on the planet.
A previous mission convinced scientists that some amazing things happen to the human body when it's weightless.
The more you see that, gosh, there are differences in their reflex, there's difference in their eyesight, there's differences in their hearts and their muscles and their lungs and their bones, and there are a lot of differences that you can pick up.
Dr. Seddon will conduct medical tests on all the crew members, including herself, to determine what makes people get out of shape in weightlessness and how it applies to people on Earth.
It's similar to the process of aging. It's similar to bed rest due to illness. So what we learn in this activity will help us understand and counteract aging processes or the atrophy due to illness and bedridden conditions.
The potential stars of this mission may not be the crew members at all, but rather a group of 48 laboratory rats. They'll be injected with hormones to determine if it helps bone development. 6 of the rats will be killed and dissected in orbit to see how their bodies adapt to weightlessness. In addition to the medical experiments, the crew members will spend time on a ham radio with school students in the United States and France.
We recognize that we go into space because we want to make a better life. We want to improve the quality of life in the future. And on the crew, we all believe the future means our kids.
The astronauts and NASA managers say they're hoping to get the shuttle into space on schedule. Managers in particular point out that an on-time launch might help erase the public perception that because of previous launch delays and satellite failures, NASA can't do anything right. John Holloman, CNN at NASA headquarters in Washington.
And the Space Shuttle Columbia's failed to get off the ground again. NASA scrubbed today's planned launch a little more than an hour ago. Details and CNN's John Holloman. John?
Reed, it was a double whammy for NASA today. After yesterday's launch delay because of computers and the weather, today's launch attempt was blown off by bad weather and a faulty 2-way radio. Launch Director Bob Seek gave the crew the bad news.
The MMT has just reviewed the situation with the failed transponder and have deemed that that's a no-go condition for today. We looked at the possibility of stowage of a spare unit and in-flight maintenance, but don't feel comfortable that they could converge on the procedures and the techniques for doing that in the time available today. So we're going to scrub.
At the time Seek scrubbed the launch, the sun was shining at the Kennedy Space Center, but the hour before, the entire launch complex was covered with rain. Eventually, it was the radio that forced the launch postponement. This radio, which they call a transponder, is one of two aboard Columbia. It's located in the nose and is used by the crew to talk to their ground controllers. NASA rules prohibit launch without two good radios on board the shuttle, but managers considered sending a working radio to the launch pad and allowing the crew to swap it after they reached orbit. It'll take 3 days to replace the laboratory rats in the cargo bay with a fresh batch and to replace the other living things which will be used by the crew in orbit. The space agency also wants to give the launch team a few days off, so they'll be rested at launch time. Next chance to get the shuttle up will come Monday morning. Again, the launch is scheduled for 10:53 Eastern Time. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia is to lift off any moment now. We're going to CNN's domestic coverage and reporter John Holloman.
Crew will do weightless workouts in an effort to counteract the effects of low gravity in the human body. It's hoped that some of this work will help doctors come up with ways to help old people who don't exercise much to counteract the effects of the aging process. After a couple of delays, the countdown is continuing, and we'll listen in the final half minute as NASA commentator Mitch Varnes watches the clock from the Kennedy Space Center. But after those couple of delays at the end of last week, there must be a terrific level of excitement among everybody down there in Florida. We'll listen.
T-minus 31 seconds, and we have auto sequence start, and Columbia is now in charge of its own launch countdown. T-minus 24 seconds. T-minus 20. All systems remain go at T-minus 15 seconds.
10. Let's go for main engine start.
Set T-minus 6, 5, 4. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia on a life sciences mission for Earth and space.
Houston's now controlling.
Houston, Columbia, roll program.
Roger, roll, Columbia. Mission Control sees a good roll maneuver, placing Columbia on the proper heading. 3 good engines at 100%. Engines are throttling back now, easing Columbia through the dense lower altitudes, but continuing to accelerate very rapidly. Columbia is already traveling over 650 miles per hour. Time 45 seconds. All systems are performing well. All 3 engines at 67% rated thrust. And 3 engines are throttling up. Houston, go at throttle up. All engines are now running at full throttle. All systems performing well. Altitude 67,000 feet. Downrange distance 8 nautical miles. Columbia is traveling over 1,000 miles per hour. Columbia continues to climb at a relatively steep angle at this point, tripling its rate of speed over the next minute. Solid rocket boosters, each delivering 3.3 million pounds of thrust, will burn out and separate at 2 minutes 3 seconds. Time now 1 minute 48 seconds. Altitude 115,000 feet. Downrange distance 18 nautical miles. SRB chamber pressure is tailing off. And Mission Control sees a good booster separation. Columbia is now flying free, powered by its own main engines. Second stage guidance is
For
now
the next 5 minutes, the astronaut crew won't have to worry about the solid rockets because, as you see, they're no longer attached. They'll just have to worry about the main engines continuing to operate as well as they have so far. Looks like everything's going very, very well for the shuttle to do this 8-minute boost into orbit from the point where the solid rockets are ignited down on the ground below.
Altitude now 222,000 feet, down
It's,
range 48 nautical miles.
We've been listening to the two-way radio communication between Commander John Blaha as he's talked back to the ground. Blaha is he's a military fighter pilot. He's a very serious guy, but you can hear the excitement in his voice.
Houston, 2-engine Ben Guerrier. 2-engine Ben Guerrier.
Columbia can now cross the Atlantic Ocean with only 2 engines should one fail. Altitude is now 263,000 feet, downrange distance 68 nautical miles.
As you can see, the shuttle is doing everything it's supposed to be doing,
and beginning to level out a bit, shedding more and more weight as propellant burns off, and continuing its rapid acceleration.
As the shuttle continues to make this 8-minute journey to orbit, we'll go back and we'll look again at the final few seconds of the countdown as Columbia lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center.
All systems remain go at T-minus 15 seconds.
10. DLS go for main engine start.
Set T-minus 6, 5, 4. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia on a life sciences mission for Earth and space.
Houston's now controlling.
Houston, Columbia, roll program. Roger, roll, Columbia.
Mission Control sees a good roll maneuver, placing Columbia on the proper heading. 3 good engines at 100%. Engines are throttling
NASA
back
spokesman
now.
Jeff Carr is watching as the shuttle continues to make its way toward orbit, about 160 miles above the Earth. And this is going to be one of the most remarkable shuttle missions ever, according to NASA managers. They say that it will last for 14 days, and during that time, the astronauts will conduct medical experiments that might help people here on Earth. Daywatch will be coming up.
Well, plagued by technical problems, the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia nonetheless takes off, picture perfect it would seem, on its 3rd attempt, leaving the Kennedy Space Center for a 14-day medical mission, a record-setting mission, the longest yet attempted by the U.S. Shuttle program.
No matter how many you see, they're always real exciting.
It's a beautiful thing to watch.
It is pretty.
15:53 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hat das Space Shuttle Columbia erfolgreich abgehoben. Wegen technischer Fehler und schlechten Wetters war der Start bereits 3-mal verschoben worden. Die 7-köpfige Mannschaft, darunter 2 Frauen, führen medizinische Experimente zur Schwerelosigkeit durch. Die mit 14 Tagen bisher längste Spacelab-Mission ist der 58. Flug einer Raumfähre. Kostenpunkt 280 Millionen Mark.
Injected one another with calcium, iron, and iodine isotopes and drew blood samples to see how flying in space affects the human body. Yesterday, 2 crew members spent nearly an hour in a vacuum bag that forced blood from their chests into their legs. Also today, an astronaut turned plumber in trying to fix a leaky toilet. NASA says it's not a serious problem, just an annoyance.
Years of space travel experience shows, as far as the human body is concerned, going up is the easy part. Coming home can be a lot tougher. Upon landing, astronauts are generally weaker than when they left, and the effects on the heart may last a week or more.
The implications are that we have to take great care of the astronauts after they come back.
Physiologist Leon Fari studies how the heart and circulatory system adapts to gravitational extremes. In zero gravity, the heart pumps more efficiently than on Earth, so the body requires less blood. It appears the excess moves out of the circulation and swells various body organs. On return, the circulatory system makes up for the shortage by shrinking a little. Vasoconstriction, as it's called, maintains normal blood pressure until the body regains its normal blood volume. That reflex, researchers say, protects space travelers, at least those who, so far, have been sent on relatively short missions.
Whether the same thing will apply after longer flights, we don't know. Whether the astronauts will maintain the reflex of vasoconstriction after such long time, we also don't know.
An Earthbound subject prepares for a few rapid orbits around a laboratory in the University at Buffalo. The centrifuge provides researchers a way to artificially increase the pull of gravity. That way they can compare how heart function varies between exaggerated and normal gravitational loads.
The heart rate went from 75 to 87. Here it's about 89, so the heart rate step. If we keep training them now, what'll happen is the heart rate would drop back down to 75 as he got more accustomed, yeah.
You okay, John, still?
Yes, feel good.
Feels good?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you go on the mouthpiece, John?
By studying what happens when you increase G, you get an idea of what things change, and you therefore understand what you've got to look for in the other direction.
Aboard the Columbia, astronauts are performing similar experiments, riding the bike and breathing into equipment that calculates oxygen use and heartbeat efficiency. The test will be repeated several times on Earth to determine how much and how long the heart takes to readjust to gravity. Learning how the body adapts may be an essential step if humans are ever to live in space rather than just visit. Dan Rutz, CNN Medical News, Buffalo.
The crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia heard some upbeat wake-up music this morning. NASA played Shiny Happy People by REM. The crew plans to conduct more medical experiments today. The 2-week voyage is scheduled to be the longest shuttle mission ever.
Members are testing how the human body adjusts to weightlessness in space. NASA is using the 2-week mission to prepare astronauts for lengthier stays in orbit. The 5 men, 2 women crew spent most of the weekend conducting similar experiments on rats, though presumably the rats didn't dance around. The crew is now midway through the medical mission. Officials at the U.S. Space Command are still unsure about the fate of a Chinese satellite that may have plunged back onto Earth. The 2-ton satellite was launched 3 weeks ago. After 10 days, it went out of control. Chinese officials say their satellite would return to Earth, or would not return to Earth, rather, for at least 6 months, but it is apparently on its way back. CNN's John Holloman has been tracking it with the aid of officials closer to the radar screens. He joins us now. Where is the satellite?
Well, it is probably, Jonathan, in the water about 500 miles to the west of Baja California, which is a part of California that's Mexican territory. It was coming down at a high rate of speed, according to U.S. Space Command officials, toward the atmosphere. And what they anticipated it would do is hit the atmosphere and either skip around a little bit or fall directly, like a rock, into the water right below where it hit the atmosphere. But in order for them to tell us for sure that that's what it did, they have to continue to look at their radar scopes, and they have these things set up all over the world. And it has to, before they will give us the official word, it has to pass over 3 radar sites and not show up. In other words, time has to progress for it to go over sites further south than where they think this thing dropped off the scope. And if it does that, then they'll know. If it doesn't show up on radar for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, they'll say, yep, we were right. It went in just where we said it went in.
Have they given you any indication of whether anyone's out there looking for it?
They have not. U.S. Space Command wouldn't have that in its bag of tricks to do. However, there might be other agencies of the U.S. or other governments that might want to have a look at this Chinese satellite, and it's possible, I suppose, that they could be out there trying to get a close look at this thing.
Now, we have a kind of a map, I think, which shows us more or less the general area it's expected to come down.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, there's the map, and that map looks at what the Space Command predicted would be the last orbit of the satellite as it came down into the atmosphere. Those red dots are about 5-minute intervals. If it had hit the atmosphere at about 11:45 Eastern time this morning, I can't give you the GMT on that, I can't do the math quickly enough, but maybe 1645 G,
right.
is that right?
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
It would have been at the dot at the top left-hand corner of your screen around Alaska. And as 5-minute intervals progressed, it would have, if it hadn't hit the atmosphere, it would have gone down over southern South America, which you can see there. And if it still hadn't hit the atmosphere, it would have continued at 5-minute intervals to make those red dots on the map. So depending, what they assume it did was hit where the big red dot is, hit the atmosphere, and then not do much jiggling around, just go straight down into the water.
So the plan, once again, 500 miles, we're saying, off the coast of California,
yeah,
give or take?
Maybe 100 miles, maybe 1,000 miles. Nobody has called us from Baja California yet to say this big Cadillac-sized item is in their backyard. It would be difficult. That's not a highly populated area there, but you know, it might have been visible to people. We're waiting to hear from our viewers.
One last question, just to reassure people in a word. Does anyone need to worry? If they're not directly in the path, is this something people watching should be worried about?
At this point, you shouldn't be worried about it at all. 2 hours ago, I might not have said that had you asked me, but I think the thing is out of orbit now. I think it is either in the ocean or on land someplace, and I think it would probably have made a big enough boom that some of CNN International's viewers around the world would have called us and said, hey, there was a big boom. And since they haven't called, I'm assuming it's in the water, and we should breathe easily.
Okay, we'll keep following it. John Holman, thanks very much. You'll be back with us later in the hours ahead. Pacific Ocean just about 4 hours ago. Officials said the point of impact was some 1,600 kilometers west of Peru. Earlier, they'd predicted it would land much further north off the Baja California Peninsula. The reconnaissance satellite was launched October 8th from the Gobi Desert. A malfunction caused China's space agency to lose control over the 2-ton satellite.
Das große Feuer, das jetzt durch den Süden von Kalifornien rast, ist selbst aus dieser Höhe klar auszumachen. Flammen und Rauch. Guten Abend, liebe Zuschauer. Fast 500 Häuser sind schon verbrannt. Tausende von Menschen auf der Flucht. Die sonnige Gegend im Westen der USA zwischen Los Angeles und der mexikanischen Grenze ist eigentlich eins der Paradiese unserer Erde. Hollywood ist dorthin gezogen, des gleichmäßig schönen Wetters wegen. Die Berühmten und Reichen Amerikas haben dort ihre Villen. Und doch ist es ein Paradies, in dem die Menschen nahe am Abgrund leben. Neben den Oasen des Reichtums und des Glücks soziale Unruhen und extreme Kriminalität. Erdbeben und Waldbrände, wie sie Europa gar nicht kennt, bedrohen immer wieder ganze Landschaften und Städte unter den Palmen. Im Herbst, wenn der Wind umschlägt und von den heißen Wüsten nach Westen weht, kann oft nur noch der Ozean die Feuerstürme stoppen. Unser Amerika-Korrespondent Steffen Seibert berichtet.
Als heute Morgen die Sonne aufging, war der sonst unbezahlbare Blick aus Earl Van Slykes Wohnzimmerfenster verhangen von Nebel und Rauch. Er signalisierte, dass auch nach dieser bangen Nacht die Gefahr noch nicht vorbei war. Die Feuerwand hatte sich durchs Tal herangeschoben, schon züngelte sie an den Rändern des Anwesens. Reporter standen bereit, um wieder eine Millionärsvilla in Flammen aufgehen zu sehen. Am Ende aber hieß ihre Geschichte, wie Earl Van Slyke noch einmal davonkam. Womit er mehr Glück hatte als viele seiner Nachbarn mit ihren beneideten Immobilien in den Hügeln nördlich von Los Angeles. Von der Millionenvilla zur rauchenden Ruine war es hier nur eine Sache von Minuten. Auch wenn viele der plötzlich Obdachlosen zu den Reichen im Lande gehören, tappen sie erst einmal hilflos und ohne ganz zu verstehen in den Trümmern ihrer Existenz. Das Feuer ist wählerisch. Es verschonte die Häuser dieser beiden. Einen Steinwurf weiter aber legte es seinen Traum in Asche.
Look at this. This is bamboo. Oh God, look at this.
Eine ganze Woche stand die Villa erst, inklusive Landschaftsgarten und Zierbrücken. Sie war gestern geflüchtet, konnte das Schicksal ihres Hab und Guts nur noch am Fernseher mitverfolgen. Ich habe mein Haus gleich am Pool erkannt und nur noch gedacht, da geht es hin. Kilometerlange Feuerfronten hatte der Wind die ganze Nacht lang durch Täler und Schluchten getrieben. Von der Feuerwehr gelegte Gegenbrände vermochten sie an manchen Stellen zu stoppen. Das knochentrockene Buschwerk aber bot letztlich zu gute Nahrung. 40.000 Hektar in Flammen, etwa 700 Häuser zerstört, aber, und das nennen viele ein Wunder, noch keine Toten. Von Malibu im Norden bis fast an die mexikanische Grenze. Von Nobelvororten bis in Wohnwagensiedlungen solche Bilder der Hilflosigkeit. Der Feind, das sind die heißen Santa Ana-Winde aus den Wüsten im Landesinneren. Immer wenn sie wehen, herrscht Brandgefahr. Kommen wie zurzeit noch Hitze und ein trockener Sommer dazu, ist Südkalifornien ein Pulverfass. Immerhin, der Wind soll am Abend abflauen. Die erste gute Nachricht seit 48 Stunden.
Decapitate and dissect some rats to study the effects of weightlessness on the rodents before they're re-exposed to gravity. The shuttle crew beamed back spectacular pictures of a lightning storm on Earth. Columbia's 14-day mission is scheduled to end on Monday.
Mission Control woke the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia with the theme song from the TV hospital show St. Elsewhere. It's D-Day for the shuttle's astronauts, D as in dissection. 5 rats will be beheaded alive to help them understand how weightlessness affects muscles. The astronauts were treated to a dramatic light show this morning. Columbia passed over the Gulf of Mexico during a vivid lightning storm.
Later, they'll perform a space first when they dissect some of the rats on board Columbia. The experiment is also part of the study of the effects of weightlessness. The rats will be frozen for study after the shuttle returns to Earth, and that's scheduled for Monday. Columbia's 7-member crew is on a 14-day medical research mission. It's the longest shuttle flight ever.
Visual perspective, not saying anything about the chemical and so forth, but from a visual perspective, it was a very clear atmosphere. Commander John, who's on his 4th space flight, said this is as clear as he's ever seen it, and it's been very good for us. So you saw the results, I think, of that fire, and as it moved up into the jet stream.
Mission Specialist Bill MacArthur says it's an almost religious experience.
Sometimes we get concerned that there's a conflict between our spiritual parts of our lives, especially as engineers, scientists, pilots, and the technical side. And I think what we see up here, actually, for those of us who do have a religious background and feel deeply religious, it just strengthens that feeling, because we look out and we do appreciate the grandeur of the heavens, the grandeur of the planet.
The crew will spend Sunday packing up the shuttle and is scheduled to return to Earth on Monday morning at Edwards Air Force Base. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
Trotz des pausenlosen Einsatzes von 15.000 Feuerwehrleuten konnte das Flammenmeer im Süden Kaliforniens bisher nur teilweise unter Kontrolle gebracht werden. Nach Angaben der Behörden sind 6 der 13 Großflächenbrände vorsätzlich gelegt worden. Die bisherige Bilanz der Feuerwalze: 60.000 Hektar verwüstetes Land, mehr als 700 abgebrannte Gebäude und rund 25.000 Obdachlose. Meteorologen sagen voraus, dass am Wochenanfang der heiße und trockene Santa Ana-Wind wieder einsetzt und sich die Lage erneut verschärfen kann. Während normalerweise die Winde aus westlichen Richtungen vom Pazifik kommen, weht der Santa Ana-Wind aus den Wüsten östlich von Los Angeles zur Küste. Die Entstehung dieses lokalen Windsystems wird gefördert, wenn sich ein Hochdruckgebiet über dem Festland aufbaut und an seiner Südseite eine östliche Luftströmung einsetzt. Die gegenwärtige Wetterlage entwickelt sich in diese Richtung. Es wird befürchtet, dass der Santa Ana-Wind mit Geschwindigkeiten bis zu 65 Kilometern pro Stunde von den Bergen herabstürzt und das Feuer auf weitere Ansiedlungen zutreibt.
The heads of 6 rats and preserve them for studies on the effects of weightlessness. The remaining 42 rats will also be sacrificed soon after touchdown scheduled Monday.
Merely hard back then, government leading the charge into space now seems almost impossible. Dreams of conquering the unknown have given way to the reality of reducing the federal budget deficit.
The super collider is dead. The taxpayer's been saved $10 billion.
But this is a setback for science. The president did think this was an important project, an important research project, and it's unfortunate that we lost.
Congress's decision to eliminate funding for the superconductor is the latest in a string of government moves to cut back scientific research. A program to search for extraterrestrials through analyzing radio waves has been eliminated. The House of Representatives has voted to cut NASA's $4 billion Advanced Solid Rocket Fuel program. The space station will be scaled back over the next few years.
We're selling off our future. In effect, we're saying, look, all that really matters is sort of getting through the next couple of years.
Cornish and other opponents of funding cutbacks say it's difficult to show practical results of scientific research before that work is completed. The Super Collider project, for instance, was designed to smash atoms and explore the origins of the universe. House Senate conferees decided to scrap the project after the House voted twice this year to kill it.
We know by history that when you make these large advances in understanding, that it ultimately bears fruit, but that comes many years later often.
And that's just the problem. With limited funds, many congressmen would rather spend the money on a bridge in their district rather than a bridge to the unknown. Scientists say federal funding cutbacks will lead to global alliances with countries pooling technology and resources. What this means is the United States could become a partner rather than a leader in scientific research. Bob Cardin for CNN.
America, we have very cold air for this time of year moving through much of the United States, especially the eastern half. That high pressure will keep much of Quebec and Ontario provinces dry as the storm pushes offshore, taking the snow shower activity with it. Out west, a weak storm will be moving through the western portions of the United States with low pressure to the north.
The Space Shuttle Columbia are preparing for Monday's landing. They drew blood from each other for the last time Sunday. Scientists say they're thrilled with the medical data collected on the 14-day mission. Columbia is to touch down at Edwards Air Force Base in California just after 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
700 Gebäude sind völlig zerstört, mehrere tausend schwer beschädigt. Bisherige Bilanz: Das Feuer hat einen Schaden von mehr als $500 Millionen angerichtet. Tausende hatten ihre Häuser verlassen und verbrachten die vergangenen Tage in Notunterkünften. Viele von ihnen sind bereits in ihre Ortschaften zurückgekehrt. Dort bietet sich ihnen ein Bild der totalen Verwüstung. Nach Erkenntnissen des FBI sind mindestens 6 Feuer durch Brandstiftung verursacht worden. Inzwischen gingen bei den Behörden 30 Bekennerbriefe ein. Wir nehmen diese Briefe sehr ernst, sagt dieser Feuerwehroffizier. Sobald uns einer erreicht, beginnen wir mit den Nachforschungen. Die Gefahr ist noch nicht gebannt. Sollten in den nächsten Tagen die berüchtigten heißen Winde wieder aufleben, ist mit neuen Feuerausbrüchen zu rechnen.
Im Laufe des heutigen Tages wieder zur Erde zurückkehren. Die 7 Besatzungsmitglieder, 5 Männer und 2 Frauen, haben bereits mit den Vorbereitungen für die Landung begonnen. Um 16:06 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit soll die Fähre auf dem kalifornischen Luftwaffenstützpunkt Edwards aufsetzen. Während ihrer insgesamt 224 Erdumkreisungen untersuchten die Astronauten die Auswirkungen der Schwerelosigkeit auf den menschlichen Organismus. An Bord waren auch 48 Laborratten, von denen 6 während des Fluges zu Forschungszwecken seziert wurden.
The crew spent its last full day in space taking more heart measurements and drawing more blood to test the effect of weightlessness on humans and on rats. Scientists expect the results to help them better understand such common ailments as motion sickness and anemia. Columbia is due to land in California at 15:06 GMT. CNN International plans live coverage of the landing whenever it happens.
Their record 14-day mission was devoted to medical research. CNN plans live coverage of the landing at 10:05 a.m. Eastern, just over 3 hours from now.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia is on its way home, bearing the results of 2 weeks of medical research. The crew spent its last full day in space taking more heart measurements and drawing more blood to test the effects of weightlessness on humans and rats. Scientists expect that the results will help them better understand such common ailments as motion sickness and anemia.
A California landing is the end of the line for their record-breaking 14 days in space. Columbia's scientific mission was aimed at studying the effects of weightlessness over prolonged periods of time. It is now 8:05 and time to go.
Astronauts are homeward bound at this hour. They're scheduled to land about 2 hours from now. CNN's John Holman joins us now with an update on what is a record-setting mission, after all.
Absolutely, John. And I talked to the astronauts over the weekend. The first question I asked them was to take a deep breath and tell me what it smelled like in this school bus-sized space shuttle where they have been together. At that time, it was about 12 days together. And the fellow who fixed the space commode early in the mission said he had fixed it well enough so it smelled sort of normal. It smelled more like a school bus than what it might have smelled like for these guys. Right now, while we're talking, Shuttle Commander John Blaha has closed Columbia's payload bay doors in preparation for the landing. He's ordered the crew members into those orange pressure suits, and in 1 hour from now, he will fire Columbia's braking rockets. By doing this, he guarantees the shuttle will come down on schedule just after 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The astronauts spent time late yesterday packing up Columbia's Spacelab, and it's easy to see they are looking forward to coming home to their families. The scientists on the ground who have been working with them won't let them go home right away, though. In fact, these 7 people are going to be tested for another 45 days to see how their bodies readapt to gravity after 14 days in space. The Columbia broke the previous shuttle endurance record about 3 hours ago. It's now been in orbit longer than any previous space shuttle, and it could have stayed up for another 3 days if NASA had decided to extend the mission further. When the crew touches down at Edwards Air Force Base, we won't get to see the crew members walk down the steps as we usually do. NASA is sending medical teams inside to carry everybody out on stretchers. NASA says the reason for this is to prevent their bodies from being affected by weightlessness. They'll be taken immediately to a medical lab for another round of tests. And the 48 laboratory rats, Jonathan, they will be removed from the space lab immediately as well. 6 of those rats were dissected in space on Saturday. The other 42 will be taken off, and they will go into medical tests. They're not going to probably live to see the weekend either. They'll all be taken apart, and scientists will study their bodies.
Let's be absolutely certain about this. People tuning in about 2 hours from now are going to see the astronauts coming out flat on their backs. That doesn't mean anything is wrong, though.
No, actually, they won't even get to see that. What they're going to do to prevent people from being worried about this is take an astronaut, a people mover sort of piece of equipment, and put it up to the side door of the shuttle and then block our view. The guys with stretchers will go into the shuttle, take these people out, put them in the van, and we won't even see them at all until they come out of their first round of medical tests, which will take several hours after they touch down.
That's one strange aspect of this mission. Another one is, if I've read the papers right, they were using a little guillotine on the rats that they brought up.
Yeah, it's a thing that's commonly used in animal laboratories, Jonathan. I'll show you sort of how it operates. It's sort of like the paper cutter that was in your elementary school. There's a flat piece of metal here, there's a blade here, the rat's head goes in between, and the blade comes down and takes off the head. It takes about 2 seconds, and the animal rights activists don't like the idea of killing rats, but NASA says they've talked to a lot of scientists who say this is the quickest and most least painful way to do it. NASA, in its terminology, calls it the rodent dispatcher. And
why were they dispatching rodents?
Well, what they wanted to do was to get some information on the rats before their bodies had a chance to readapt to gravity. The 42 rats who are going to be dissected back here on Earth will have already started to change back and be different from how they were while they were in space. The 6 rats that were dissected on Saturday will not have had any effects of gravity on their bodies for the whole length of the mission. So they think that their bones will be much smaller, perhaps, than the bones of the rats that have readapted to gravity on Earth. They'll have, you lose red blood cells in your body if you're a rat or a human in weightlessness. These rats will have fewer red blood cells, they think, than the ones that will be looked at back on Earth. And it was the only way to do that. If they'd let the rats live till they returned to the planet, their bodies would have begun to readapt to gravity.
Okay, well, rats and people and shuttle will all be back in about 2 hours' time. We're going to have live coverage of that, in fact. That's coming up in 2 hours, 15:06 GMT, a little less than 2 hours, in fact, but CNN International will indeed have live coverage. We thank John Hallman. He will be back with us, we expect. Still ahead, though, on this edition of World News, a look at international weather and the latest on Typhoon Ira, which has now slammed into the northern Philippines. Stay with us. Live landing of Columbia coming up in just a few minutes.
We'll leave our regular programming at this time to go live to our domestic network, CNN. We'll rejoin you shortly after it has safely touched down.
And the medical experiments that they've done, we now have the longest woman in space, and astronaut Shannon Lucid, who's been up 32 or 33 days, longer than any other woman on Earth. And the 2-woman, 5-man crew is coming down to Earth at Edwards Air Force Base in California rather than the Florida landing strip near the launch pad for several reasons. First, the shuttle is heavier than usual because it has that big Skylab in the back. It weighs 228,000 pounds, the whole thing. It's harder to stop when it weighs that much, so they need a longer runway. Also, the crew has been weightless longer than usual at 14 days, and that could affect Commander John Blaha and pilot Rick Searfoss as they try to land the shuttle. The runway where they're coming down, runway 22 at Edwards, is 3 miles long and 300 feet wide, so they have the opportunity to make some mistakes and still be careful and safe.
Houston, we show you on glide slope, on center line, surface winds are 350 at 1 to 2 knots.
The scientists who are working with the 48 lab rats aboard are also based in California. It's going to be easier to get those rats out and start work on them on the ground if they land on the West Coast. Immediately after landing, the shuttle will coast to a stop, And there will be a people mover, similar to the thing that you see at some airports in the United States, that will go out to the side of it, and it has pistons inside that raise it up to the crew cabin entrance. And we're not going to see the astronauts walk down the steps of the shuttle as we normally do.
Why is that?
Because they want to keep them on their backs for the next 6 or 8 hours. They don't want them to walk. They don't want to do anything that will affect the fact that they have been weightless for 14 days. They want to do some medical tests on them inside this people mover. They're going to put them on a plane that'll take them out to the Johnson Space Center in Texas today, where most of the medical team that's been working on them is based. I'll be quiet and we'll watch the touchdown here.
Main gear touchdown. And nose gear touchdown.
Even though
Columbia is rolling out on runway 22 at Edwards Air Force Base, traveling 5,840,000 miles and completing 14 days in space, which makes the STS-58 mission the longest flight in the shuttle program.
Even though there are no engines, there's nothing there to create sound aboard the shuttle. You could hear the sound it made as it touched down. Just the fact that it's moving so much air out of the way as the drag chute in the rear. It's now been disconnected, so looks like it's going to be a picture-perfect landing here in California. There are numerous cameras. I think NASA has more than 20 at Edwards Air Force Base to capture this from various angles. But on the 3.5-mile runway, they didn't have to use all of it at all, despite the extra heavy weight of that Spacelab inside.
A perfect landing after a mission and so many other perfect experiments and everything that went
We've been watching CNN's coverage of the landing of the Space Shuttle Columbia, safely on the ground now at Edwards Air Force Base.
Columbia auf die Erde zurück. 2 Frauen und 5 Männer hatten während dieser Zeit den Einfluss der Schwerelosigkeit auf den menschlichen Organismus untersucht. Auf der Edwards Air Base sind alle Vorbereitungen für die Landung getroffen. Wir sehen es hier und bei uns im Studio kommentiert das Ganze und den Rest noch Volker Kado.
Ja, wir sehen gerade, wie die Raumfähre aufsetzt. Der Pilot Richard Zierfoss hat jetzt eigentlich die wichtigste Aufgabe zu erfüllen, das Ding sauber runterzubringen. Und wunderbar, das Hauptwerk setzt ganz weich und sachte auf. Jetzt kommt die Nase langsam runter. Die Landegeschwindigkeit ist etwa 350 Kilometer pro Stunde. Da sehen wir auch, da wird der Bremsschirm entfaltet. Wiegt ja ungefähr 100 Tonnen, die Raumfähre. So dass eigentlich doch ohne Schirm die Ausrollstrecke natürlich viel zu lang wäre. Die Bahn ist zwar ungefähr 4,5 Kilometer lang, aber diese Masse erstmal zum Stoppen zu bringen. Man muss ja noch dazu sagen, dass die Raumfähre ja auch kein Triebwerk für die Erdatmosphäre besitzt und dass deswegen diese Landung relativ risikovoll ist. Man kann auch keine Schubumkehr machen. Es muss alles beim ersten Mal klappen, so sage ich immer, ja.
Vielleicht nochmal, jetzt rollt die Columbia da einigermaßen sachte aus. Vielleicht noch einmal etwas zu dem Auftrag. Es ging um den Einfluss der Schwerelosigkeit auf den menschlichen Organismus. Was wird da genau untersucht? Wie muss man sich das vorstellen?
Ja, die Wissenschaftler haben ja vor, eine bemannte Raumstation zu bauen um die Erde. Die Amerikaner verfolgen ein solches Projekt, weil Forschungen aus dem Weltraum für die Erde sehr von Interesse sind, zum Beispiel Klimaforschung, Meteorologie und verschiedene andere Sachen. Und die Raumfahrer, die jetzt oben sind, die in Raumstationen arbeiten, zum Beispiel in der Raumstation Mir, leiden unter den Bedingungen der Schwerelosigkeit. Das sieht so aus, dass zum Beispiel Übelkeit in den ersten Tagen auftritt, dass Muskeln sich zurückbilden, Kreislaufschwächen auftreten. Der ganze menschliche Organismus ist ja hat sich ja im langen Evolutionsprozess unter den Bedingungen der Schwerkraft herausgebildet. Und der Mensch, also der Körper hat sich praktisch so entwickelt, dass mit einem bestimmten Energie- und Kraftaufwand Wasser zum Beispiel in den Kopf gepumpt werden muss oder auch Blut. Und wenn das jetzt eben fehlt, Schwerelosigkeit herrscht, dann kommt zum Beispiel viel zu viel Blut oder zu viel Wasser in den Kopf und die Gesichter dunsen auf. Um einen längeren Aufenthalt im Weltraum, zum Beispiel an einer Raumstation zu ermöglichen, muss man diese Probleme lösen, auch zum Beispiel um zum Mars überhaupt fliegen zu können. Und diese Experimente, die dort ausgeführt worden sind, die haben eben dazu gedient.
14 Tage war die Truppe gemeinsam unterwegs. Alle sind wieder heile angekommen. Volker Kado, vielen Dank erstmal. Bei uns geht's weiter mit dem Nachrichtenüberblick.
Flug der US-Raumfähre Columbia. Vor einer knappen Stunde landete sie auf dem Luftwaffenstützpunkt Edwards in Kalifornien. Die 5 Männer und 2 Frauen an Bord hatten im All 14 Experimente durchgeführt. Gestern wurden erstmals Ratten unter Bedingungen der Schwerelosigkeit getötet und seziert. Proben aus dem Innenohr wurden entnommen für Analysen des Gleichgewichtssinns. Während des 2-wöchigen Flugs nahmen die Astronauten auch Versuche an sich selbst vor, um negative Folgen der Schwerelosigkeit zu bekämpfen.
The Space Shuttle Columbia landed just more than an hour ago at Edwards Air Force Base in California, landed with a new endurance record. Columbia's mission of 14 days, 13 minutes was the longest of any shuttle flight, and by nearly 5 hours. The astronauts worked often 18-hour days on their medical research, designed mainly to study how weightlessness affects the body. And that's World News from Washington for now. I'm Reed Collins. Thank you. CNN and Company's next on CNN International.
And nose gear touchdown. Columbia is rolling out on runway 22 at Edwards Air Force Base, traveling 5,840,000 miles and completing 14 days in space, which makes the STS-58 mission the longest flight in the shuttle program.
3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia on a life sciences mission for Earth and space.
From the moment they lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center, the Columbia astronauts made history. Astronaut Bill MacArthur says he wasn't scared, even though it was his first launch.
And the only thing we felt was excitement. I mean, it was just the excitement of finally being here, and we were ready to go. And when we got that push off the pad, instead of being something violent and unpleasant, it was like a giant comforting hand had given us a good hard shove in the back.
Once they were in orbit, the astronauts started work immediately, setting up their Spacelab orbiting laboratory and beginning a 2-week course of experiments in how human bodies change when they're weightless. There were blood tests and injections of radioactive chemicals and dozens of additional needle sticks for the astronauts and their partners, 48 laboratory rats, only one of which made it to television.
It hurts just as much in space as it does down on Earth. And I've been stuck almost every day. We had a couple of real good space days when we weren't stuck. But the one positive thing is that the people who are sticking me are getting a lot better at it.
The crew pedaled a bicycle to test heart and lung function. Marty Fettman became the first American to force his heart to beat 199 times a minute in weightlessness. Some of what we saw was the usual. Commander John Blaha in a vacuum bag which pulled fluid from his upper body into his legs. Scientists hoped this would help him land the shuttle better. But some of what the crew did was unusual, being pulled down to the floor by bungee cords to simulate falling. Watching a dome filled with dots rotate around an eye. Spinning in a rotating chair, all designed to determine how the inner ear and the balance reflex change after longer and longer periods of weightlessness. Among the records broken, Shannon Lucid, after 4 shuttle flights, has spent more time in space than any other woman. Payload Commander Ray Seddon has now been weightless longer than her husband, NASA's chief astronaut, Hoot Gibson. She celebrated that and spent time showing you can do amazing things when you're weightless. When Columbia touched down at Edwards Air Force Base, it had been in space longer than any previous shuttle. Crew members will spend the next 45 days undergoing tests to find out how they're readapting to gravity on Earth. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
NASA is turning to its old nemesis to keep its space station dream alive. On Thursday, NASA officials announced an agreement with their Russian counterparts to jointly build a space station tentatively called Alpha. Alpha would be manned by a crew of 4 American astronauts and 2 Russian cosmonauts, and according to NASA, would be in orbit by the year 2001. But Congress will have to approve this space odyssey, and lawmakers came within 1 vote of killing NASA's Freedom space station earlier this year. In spite of uncertainty about the future of Space Station Freedom, construction is underway. As CNN's Al Himman reports, the work going on now could have important applications on Earth.
Robots work hour after hour welding giant aluminum sections of a space station that may never fly. But at Boeing's manufacturing facility at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, no one really believes that the United States will not build some sort of orbiting space laboratory.
We're in production on the space station. We've built hardware, and that hardware will fly.
The plans keep changing for what used to be called Space Station Freedom. The latest design includes major equipment contributions from the Europeans and Japanese, and perhaps the Russians. The U.S. construction team continues building the crew modules even before there's a final plan and full congressional funding. Boeing engineers do not believe their work is in vain, even if the project is scrubbed.
The technologies that we've developed for the space station manufacturing have commercial uses, and they're available now.
The newest and the most exciting development, say the space station engineers, is this first-of-a-kind digital X-ray machine. A simple change in the configuration of the X-ray head, coupled with an advanced digital electronic sensor instead of film, and presto, a better, safer way to inspect for cracks and faults in precision welds.
This crack would be 0.194 or 195 inches long. Any crack in the fracture critical hardware on the space station is a rejectable condition.
Engineers had to struggle to make these defective welds in order to demonstrate the new digital X-ray process. But they're already looking past aluminum joints in space to tomorrow's medical X-ray process.
The sensors and the technology that's used allow us to use lower levels of radiation and to get an X-ray image faster. So therefore, the hazard to people in using X-rays is now diminished.
The engineers foresee a day soon when all doctors can study a computer-enhanced digital X-ray image instead of film. The space station manufacturing team also foresees a shrinking role for the highly trained human welder. Robotic welders now do much of the precision work on the space station. With thousands of feet of perfect welds under their belts, the robots offer another benefit.
That robot will not only weld better, it will weld faster than people. And so it cuts the cost of manufacturing the space station hardware.
These builders of tomorrow hope their cost-cutting and technology transfer successes today will help them win their fight to launch a space station in the future.
Raumfahrtzentrum Kourou aus 2 Satelliten ohne Probleme ins All gebracht. Der europäische Wettersatellit Meteosat 6 soll seinen baugleichen Vorgänger Meteosat 5 ablösen, der nach 2,5 Dienstjahren künftig als Reservesatellit dient. Alle Systeme von Meteosat laufen nach Angaben des Europäischen Kontrollzentrums ESOC in Darmstadt normal. Das zweite System, ein mexikanischer Fernmeldesatellit, soll vor allem Telefongespräche und Fernsehprogramme in Lateinamerika übermitteln.
Mithilfe dieses Satelliten will eine Firma im US-Bundesstaat Virginia in den Markt für hochauflösende Fotos einsteigen. Der Haken bei der Sache: Die Technik des neu entwickelten Satelliten entspricht der internationaler Geheimdienste. Das heißt, die amerikanische Regierung will den geplanten Start von Eyeglass 1996 verhindern. Die nationale Sicherheit sei in Gefahr. Argument der Opposition: Russland und Frankreich haben ähnliche Hightech-Geräte in Arbeit. Die Amerikaner könnten somit die ersten auf dem internationalen Markt sein und kräftig Profit mit den qualitativ hochwertigen Satellitenbildern machen. Um den Verkauf der Fotos an fremde Geheimdienste zu verhindern, soll jetzt ein Komitee des Senats entsprechende Gesetzesvorlagen entwerfen. Die Macher von Eyeglass wollen auf jeden Fall in 2 Jahren mit dem Verkauf der Fotos beginnen.
This is the countryside of Chile, seen from a satellite 200 miles up. U.S. companies sell pictures like these to customers around the world, but government restrictions prevent the sale of more close-up views, citing national security. Well, now there's pressure on the Clinton administration to lift the veil of secrecy. One reason is competition. Russia and France are developing the ability to sell clearer satellite images.
By granting a license unencumbered by inappropriate and burdensome conditions, the U.S. government will enable U.S. industry to take advantage of its technological leadership, its entrepreneur spirit, and thereby capture most of the world market.
CIA Director James Woolsey told the Senate committee this week that the administration is investigating a number of options, but has not reached a decision.
We no longer maintain a blanket opposition to the release of some substantive data, and will consider the release of certain U.S.-originated technology for use by some, I repeat, some foreign governments.
Northrop White Sands in New Mexico, we have a chance of rain showers there, and that site is being ruled out as a contingency landing site at this point. Overseas at the transoceanic abort landing sites, the weather is also looking to be acceptable. Both the Morón site in Spain and Benguerir Airport in Morocco are showing good weather systems. However, we only need one good TAL site to launch, and there has not been a selection of the prime site at this point yet, but chances are it will either be Morón Air Base in Spain or the Benguerir Airport in Morocco. No significant issues being worked at this time in the firing room that would impact liftoff at 10:53. We have good weather. The astronauts are in the process of beginning their suit-up operations, and following that are scheduled to go out to the launch pad at about 7:38 this morning. In the operations and checkout building, the STS-58 flight crew are donning their flight suits in preparation for this morning's launch. Our commander is Colonel John Blaha, giving us a thumbs up and signaling that he's ready for flight today. Payload specialist is Dr. Marty Fettman. This will be the first trip in space for Dr. Fettman, who also has the distinction of becoming the first veterinarian to make a shuttle flight. Here's mission specialist Dr. David Wolf, wishing everyone a good morning and gearing up for his first flight in space. Mission specialist number 2 is Bill MacArthur. Bill is a lieutenant colonel in the Army and has served as a CAPCOM or capsule communicator in the Johnson Space Center among his duties since becoming an astronaut in 1990. This will be the first trip in space for Lieutenant Colonel MacArthur. And here's our payload commander and mission specialist number 1, Dr. Ray Seddon, giving us the AOK sign and a thumbs up. This will be the third trip in space for Dr. Seddon, who also, aside from her astronaut duties, serves as an emergency room physician in Houston hospitals. Columbia's commander is Columbia's pilot is Rick Searfoss, and this will be the first trip in space for Rick. Our mission specialist number 4 is Dr. Shannon Lucid, obviously very relaxed this morning. This will be the 15th flight in space for Columbia, which was the very first space shuttle, originally launched on April 12th, 1981. And we have a live video shot of our 7 STS-58 crew members as they leave their crew quarters en route for the elevator. Our Director of Flight Crew Operations, David Leesma, and our T-38 and shuttle training aircraft weather pilot, Jim Weatherby, accompanying the crew members. The crew being led out by Commander John Blaha and Dr. Ray Seddon, our payload commander.
OTC, OVCC. Last crew members boarding at this time. Copy.
Mission Specialist number 4, Dr. Shannon Lucid, now entering the vehicle and becoming the 7th and final crew member aboard Columbia. T-minus 8 minutes and counting.
OTC PLT, essential bus source fuel cell switches complete. Copy.
T-minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds, and the ground launch sequencer has initiated retraction of the orbiter crew access arm away from Columbia. This bridge between the orbiter and the launch tower can be reinstalled back in place within 15 seconds if need be. T-minus 7 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting.
Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. QS go for orbiter APU start. Copy. PLT OTC perform APU start. APU starts and work.
Orbiter Test Conductor Brian Monborn has given our pilot Rick Searfoss the command to start Columbia's auxiliary power unit. Once the pilot completes this task, hydrazine will begin flowing into the holding tanks of the orbiter's auxiliary power units. 37 seconds before launch, the ground launch sequencer will make a final check to assure that the vent hood is positioned well away from the space shuttle.
Verify no unexpected errors. Caution warning, memory clears and work.
Orbiter Test Conductor Brian Monborn requested pilot Rick Searfoss to clear the ship's caution and warning memory system.
OTC PLT caution and warning memory clear complete. No unexpected errors.
Retraction of the external tank's gaseous oxygen vent hood is now in work.
Close and lock your visors. Initiate O2 flow. This time we're going to send you. Roger that. Closing visors. Suit O2 on.
Orbiter Test Conductor Brian Monborn instructing the flight crew to close and lock their visors. T-minus 1 minute, 50 seconds, and counting. All systems remain go at T-minus 15 seconds.
10. TLS go for main engine start.
Set T-minus 6, 5, 4. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia on a life sciences mission for Earth and space.
Houston's now controlling.
Houston, Columbia, roll program.
Roger, roll, Columbia. Mission Control sees a good roll maneuver, placing Columbia on the proper heading. 3 good engines at 100%. Engines are throttling back now, easing Columbia through the dense lower altitudes, but continuing to accelerate very rapidly. Columbia is already traveling over 650 miles per hour. Columbia continues to climb at a relatively steep angle at this point, tripling its rate of speed over the next minute. Solid rocket boosters, each delivering 3.3 million pounds of thrust, will burn out and separate at 2 minutes 3 seconds. Time now 1 minute 48 seconds. SRB chamber pressure is tailing off. And Mission Control sees a good booster separation. Columbia is now flying free, powered by its own main engines. Second stage guidance is now in effect. Altitude 184,000 feet, downrange distance 35 nautical miles.
Columbia, Houston, performance nominal.
Roger, Kurt, performance nominal.
Copy 103, converged.
Press to MECO. Columbia Houston, press to MECO.
Press to MECO.
Single engine Ben Guerrier 104. Columbia Houston, single engine Ben Guerrier 104.
Booster, any changes for the dump?
Negative, flight. Or go for the dump. MECO +2.
Copy.
Joining David Wolf in the Spacelab module is payload commander for the STS-58 mission, Ray Seddon. She's primarily been the crew member in charge of activating all of the systems in the module in preparation for the crew to move into this area and begin science activities.
You getting on here next, Bill?
I was here for W1.
Oh, you can get on here next.
Who's going to do it with
At some point, I've got to get to my cows of the mass measurement. I can't do it during this. I don't think I can.
I'm ready. Go.
It's just not comfortable to hold my head there, but you're right, I gotta look there.
Yeah.
showing a noisy signal on the EMG up here, so we're going to try and troubleshoot a little bit.
We copy that, Ray. We'll help you if we can.
Also in the foreground, Mission Specialist Dave Wolf is completing his runs in the rotating chair, the second subject of the day for that experiment. First, several runs are done where the chair is spun for about a minute, and then it stopped suddenly, and Wolf stays sitting up straight. Then runs are done with the chair spinning and then stop suddenly, and then Wolf will lean forward. Again, to test a reflex known as the vestibulo-ocular reflex, which is a series of rapid eye movements that allow us to see objects as we're in rapid motion. objects that are in rapid motion past us. It's one in the series of tests that study the sense of orientation and how it adapts to weightlessness.
This is KC-5CKM calling the K-5PXP from the Space Shuttle Columbia, over. That's C2's got someone just blabbering.
C2 does. That it?
Yeah. And we're starting to pick you up on the Space Shuttle Columbia, K-5PXP. How are you doing today?
Over. It's good for kids.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm copying you about 4 by now, over. Okay, I caught the first part that says, how does it feel, but you were cut out on the last. Say again. Well, I tell you what, it just feels great, over. None of us on this crew had any real problems in the initial adaptation to weightlessness, and now, our 3rd day out, we're just having a ball up here. It's wonderful, like floating free. Over. Okay, what I copied was the type of work that we'll be doing to find out information and research for a space station in the future. This Spacelab flight is a 2-week mission, and we're doing life sciences research, and the bulk of the research that will be done on a space station will be intended to be long-duration life sciences research. So we're part of a continuum of that research to understand how humans adapt to space, with a lot of applications for Earth-type diseases and problems that are happening on the ground. Over.
This is Mission Control on our live television from Columbia's flight deck. Shuttle Commander John Blaha is talking on the Shuttle Amateur Radio experiment with a school in San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio is Blaha's hometown, and this school setup was arranged pre-flight for him to talk to students there.
Here's some new ones. I'm ready. You're slightly broken. Go ahead with your questions.
Did you get a beat on it, Ray?
Well, Steve, if you'd relay to Isaiah, my heart rate has gotten slightly higher, although it didn't change significantly.
Okay.
I've found when I exercise up here, though, it is harder to get my heart rate up as high as I can on the ground because I'm doing so much less work. Over.
Okay, this is the flight deck here, and I'm showing you a parachute in the commander seat area. Then I'm showing you where we put our messages. Those are the failure impact workaround messages, our next primary landing site opportunities, and then the deorbit propellant tank data. That's the flight plan summary right there. This is the emergency oxygen mask. Each crew member has one of them. This unit here is the wireless communications unit. And here you see the RHC and the flight instruments that we use to monitor the vehicle and fly it. Here's the orbiter heads-up display, the CRTs, the keyboards that we use for entries into the computers. There's the autopilot here right underneath the flight plan. Our flight deck just has a heck of a lot of equipment on it, and this is a little pan of that so that everyone, those are the aft windows and the overhead windows, and our comm equipment over on the far left side of the picture there. We're starting here on the port or left side of the mid-deck, and believe it or not, having one waste compartment has not been a problem for 7 people. We get through there just fine in the morning. One delta is that we have the urine monitoring system attached, and we take a sample of every urine void that we make. Transitioning on, you'll see once we take those samples, we take the sample containers and we move them over and put them in the enhanced orbiter refrigerator freezer, which is in the freezer mode right now, and it currently appears to be running pretty well. After we've taken care of those things, we're all interested in having breakfast. For each day, we put our breakfast tray out, our breakfast drawer, and we have a part of it has breakfast, then lunch, and dinner. We rehydrate the foods here, and then we can put anything that needs to be warmed down in the oven, and it warms up very nicely, and we have quite a tasty meal. But along with monitoring everything that goes out of our bodies, we're also monitoring everything that goes in, and we use this barcode reader to record all the food that we eat. All items are barcoded. Of course, trash is a big problem, as you can imagine, so we have to take care of it. Here we're taking trash out of our trash compactor, and when it is full, we take it and move it to our waste trash volume in the floor. We store all sorts of equipment in these lockers: clothes, washcloths, towels, film, etc., everything you need to live. We receive our messages through this machine, a thermal imaging printing system, and Bill puts it all out in the morning. We store our launch and entry spacesuits behind this net. We store the lower body negative pressure system here while not in use.
Okay, here we are, Marty.
What's this coming up?
This is Korea. We're doing a mapping pass of Korea. I think this is Incheon we're coming over. We'll move the camera up.
Are you out of film?
Hold it there.
Battery dead? Check the battery. Battery's good.
Marty, keep open
Turn manually? Oh, sorry. Turn manually?
South Korea, we're over.
Rick, we're coming inside to the camcorder.
Okay, let me get one more shot with a wide field of view viz of the entire area from Baja, California, up to the Salton Sea, then into Los Angeles, looking across the desert, and all the way up the coast, and I'll be right with you. John's up here exercising, so it's a busy flight deck.
Copy that.
No, ma'am, we haven't yet performed the dissections. Those are scheduled for Flight Day 13. We focused mainly on the hematology activities, which on human studies to look at the anemia of space. Early data in SLS-1 showed that a release of red blood cells from the bone marrow was not occurring normally. So we're now looking at red blood cell incorporation of iron and release from the bone marrow into the blood. Also doing animal studies that do those same analyses, and we'll understand the red blood cell kinetics and iron incorporation to a much greater extent. Marty has something to add here. Yeah, this is one of the important things.
You know, sometimes you hear people talk about, you know, the spiritual effect it has on you, or personal feelings about how it affects your life later when you come back from being in space. I'm wondering, while I get to talk to someone out there, how do you feel right now about that? Do you think it'll affect you long term or no?
This is Mission Control Houston. We're about to lose contact with the Shuttle Columbia through the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. We'll be losing this live downlink picture from the payload bay cameras. Columbia now passing over the southern portion of the Caspian Sea on this 12th orbit of the Earth at an altitude of 156 nautical miles. All systems aboard the shuttle continue to work well as the crew is in its sleep shift, scheduled to awaken about 2.5 hours from now.
This is Mission Control Houston. Columbia is just crossing the west coast of the United States, up just north of San Francisco in the Oakland area. Columbia moving across Death Valley. This is the 68th orbit of Columbia's STS-58 mission. Lake Mead just coming into view, which is the border of Nevada and Utah, as well as Arizona. And the Grand Canyon just moving out of the picture up to the upper left. This pass of Columbia across the United States should take the orbiter over most of Arizona, New Mexico, and a large portion of Texas before moving out across the Gulf of Mexico. And Columbia just passing high above Lubbock, Texas, the gray area in this left center portion of the screen. Columbia is making a swing across Texas from the northwest to southeast. And the Dallas-Fort Worth area just coming into view from the lower right-hand portion of the screen. And Lake Livingston, which is in the northwest portions of Houston, up near Huntsville.
This is Spacelab Mission Operations Control. Columbia is now coming up on the southern coast of Australia. The island over towards the right-hand portion of this particular downlink view is Kangaroo Island. This is the area near Adelaide, Australia. The large cluster of lights that is towards, well, moving into the center of the screen right at this moment is the city of Adelaide.
Larry, that was really beautiful, and we just want to tell you how much we've enjoyed working with all of you. You've sure been a help and a comfort to know that you're there, monitoring our systems, helping us, watching us, getting us through the difficult spots. And we really appreciate all the hard work that people put into getting us up here and getting all the equipment ready, putting the procedures and the time.
Houston, Columbia.
Ryan and Shannon. Good. Think what they're gonna smell like.
Pull the seat down so I can show all the bags over there.
Sure.
8 at 120. 7 at 100. 5 at 90. 6 at 80. 6 at 7.
No.
Chip's coming. Chip's coming.
Okay.
At 58 knots.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I know why.
Yeah.
For the 19 years.
Yeah, understand. Okay. 20 knots. 10 knots.
There goes the STA. Houston,
Wheel stop.
Columbia is wheel stop. Good work, Rick, Bill, everybody.
Columbia Houston, we see you go for the PTIs.
Roger, go for the PTI.
The PTI is a program test input. This will be a firing of about 10 seconds in duration of 2 reaction control systems jets on either side of the nose of the orbiter. Range from the landing site is now 68 nautical miles. Columbia's speed is 1,900 miles per hour. Switching to a long-range camera from the Dryden Flight Research Facility. Columbia's altitude is 40,000 feet. The twin sonic booms of the orbiter are announcing the arrival in the landing area. Commander John Blaha is now flying the vehicle, having taken over for the software. As he begins the wide left overhead turn to set up on final approach to runway 22. Time to touchdown, 1 minute, 45 seconds.
Columbia Houston, we show you on glide slope, on center line, surface winds are 350 at 1 to 2 knots.
Columbia's altitude is about 6,000 feet. Commander will shortly raise the nose of the orbiter to slow the descent. And the pilot will lower the landing gear at about 400 feet. The landing gear is now down. Main gear touchdown. And nose gear touchdown. Columbia is rolling out on runway 22 at Edwards Air Force Base, traveling 5,840,000 miles and completing 14 days in space, which makes the STS-58 mission the longest flight in the shuttle program.
Houston, Columbia is wheel stop.
Columbia Houston, we copy wheel stops, and congratulations on a very successful life sciences mission, and also for being the 4th longest mission in our space program history.
Roger that, Kurt. And from the entire crew, we sure appreciate all the help we got on this mission from everybody on the ground.
John, we copy, and we're proud to be a part of it. We have no post-landing deltas at this time, and you're go to proceed.
Roger, Convoy Commander, this is Columbia. Read you loud and clear.
Columbia, Houston, good morning. We know you're out there somewhere.
Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Got you loud and clear. It's Charlie, and Orbit 3's here with you.
Oh, I tell you, Charlie, y'all are good this morning, Greg. To the music, buddy.
We're hoping you're having a good day.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. As I'm sure you can appreciate, this lab is an awful lot of fun.
Roger that.
Well, good morning, Houston. It must be Halloween down there on Sunday morning.
Columbia, Houston, good morning, John. Trick or treat.
Top of the morning to you, Charlie.
Same to you, John. Happy Halloween.
Columbia for John, we are forecasting that the temperature will be in the mid-40s at your landing time at Edwards.
Okay, well, that's useful information. Thank you. And do you have any kind of forecast on the weather at all and the surface winds at that time?
John, we're going to tip you up that message shortly so that you have the complete information.
Okay, thanks.
On glide slope and center line.
Copy glide slope and center line.
Columbia, Houston, we show you on glide slope, on center line. Surface winds are 350 at 1 to 2 knots.
Okay, stand by all operators for post-landing deltas. Okay, post-landing deltas max.
No deltas flight.
Prop.
No deltas flight.
None.
Columbia, Houston, we copy wheel stops, and congratulations on a very successful life sciences mission, and also for being the
GPS
fourth
post-landing
longest
deltas.
mission in our space program history.
Inco. No deltas
Roger that, Kurt.
Booster.
And from the
No
entire
deltas flight.
crew, we
Payloads.
sure appreciate all the help
FAO.
we got
No
on
deltas.
this mission from everybody on the
GPS
ground.
post-landing deltas.
None flight.
No post-landing deltas. Proceed with nominal operations.
John, we copy, and we're proud to be a part of it. We have no post-landing deltas at this time, and you're go to proceed.
Inco, let me know when you've commanded the uppers.
Roger, Convoy Commander, this is Columbia. Huntsville Space Lab. We're with you. We're ready to begin another day of research. We're all set up to do the animals in the aft of the laboratory and waiting for your words to begin.
Huntsville Space Lab, good morning. Look forward to another good day. Space Lab Huntsville, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're done with the echoes on Rick. I tried the tilt screen several times and my arm was getting tired, but I think that last one looked good. And so he's heading back up to the front.
Yeah, the ground liked the echo that you did on Rick. They're really very pleased with it, and thank both of you for that extra effort.
Thank you, and we'll pass that on to Rick.
Good morning, Ray. This is APS from SLS-1. How are you today?
Oh, that's a nice, familiar voice. Marty and I are standing here smiling at each other. Hi, Bob.
All right. How are things going for both of you?
Just fantastic, Bob. This is like the greatest thing I've ever done. We are having a fun time and getting a hell of a lot of work done. I hope you're having fun watching us.
Absolutely. I surely am, and I'm delighted to be back down here for a few days at the POC, and glad I had a chance to talk to you this morning.
Good to hear from you, Bob, and thanks for helping me get up here.
You're most welcome, and behave yourselves on Halloween.